Let's talk about the Rose Bowl and everything else happening. Ohio State beat the hell out of Tennessee. Okay, Ohio State beat the hell out of Tennessee. And I saw your Sports Center hit afterwards with Linda Cohn, who we all have massive respect for. And you talked about how, these seedings and these rankings that have happened, and there's always an uproar publicly from people about, well, they have 11 wins, they have 10 wins. And I think you were calculating in every year that has happened in college ball when it was 4 teams, and then now it's 12. When it was 2 teams, that's always a talking point, always a talking point. And then the first round was basically all blowouts of multiple scores, except for that Indiana Notre Dame.
That was tight.
27-17, just 10 points. That's the closest margin of victory throughout the entire first round. But it was a lot of blowouts in this first round, and we talked about how that could be possible. How do you think it's changed for next year, and what are your thoughts on the 12-team playoff and how it started thus far?
I think I said it on that post-game comment. I think people were, some of the responses, it sounds like people were thinking I was trying to go to bat for other teams. I'm really not. My whole thing is I just don't want, if the reasoning on the at-large teams is they're better, not only the resume, but they're a better team, then put them in. I just don't want to see a team get in because they're 11-1, and if the logic is they're 11-1 that they should be in, I just don't think that's all it should be. I think, and I always bring this up at the ESPN seminar that you are part of this year. We appreciate you gutting that out and sticking around for both days. I always ask the question in front of everybody so we understand the ground rules for the committee. Always raise my hand and I say, as they talk about the CFP, are we trying to figure out who the most the better teams are, or the teams that have kind of earned their way and they deserve to be there? Because sometimes we get to near the end and you hear a lot of, well, they deserve to be in. And I've always asked him that every August before we get started, are you trying to find the best 12 or the most deserving 12? And every year they've said, no, we want the best 12. So if Indiana and SMU and Ohio State, any of these at-large teams, Penn State, Texas, whoever you think, if these are the best at-large teams, then so be it. Put them in. And if Indiana's one of them, and I apologize to you and the Indiana fans, I think I was just finished calling that game and thought about the Friday night game when I was standing on the field. And I looked at Indiana, and I really wondered, is this one of the best 12 teams as I'm watching them play? I know you said you thought that was a close game.
What? That's 27-17. 27-17, right?
And if you take out that 98-yard,
showed a lot of fight, never gave up.
Field goal in 20-degree weather. Mm-hmm. Yeah, hey. We get what you're saying. Yeah. Final score 27-17. Final score 27-17. But yeah, for a large portion.
But I'm just saying, like, if I'm in that committee room and if I were discussing it, I guess my thing would be, because they all get in it together and debate and discuss. My only thing would be, guys, remember in August we were talking about trying to find the best 12. And listen, I'm not trying to go to bat for Alabama, who got embarrassed by a 6-6 Oklahoma team at the end of the year. South Carolina probably had as strong a case, and people say, well, they lost to Alabama and to Ole Miss. How can you put them over? So I really wasn't even getting into the weeds of Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, whoever. It wasn't about, Miami of Florida, another team in the ACC that you could talk about. It wasn't even debating teams. It was just, if we're going to pick these at-large teams, if we can all, as a committee, put our arms around each other and say, hey, guys, we've done our job. Resume is important, but these are the best teams that we feel, and that was what they've asked us to do. That's all I was saying.
Yeah.
If these are the best teams, then great. Have at it. If it's a 17-point differential, whatever the score was, I don't really care. I just want to make sure that that's what we're doing. And if that's what we did this year, then so be it. But I just heard a lot of these teams are deserving to be there, and I just that's not what they're supposed to be looking at.
Okay.
Deserving.
And when you asked that question, you also said, as somebody who has called a lot of these games. I've been very lucky. You did the whole. I'm very fortunate, very lucky to be a part of a lot of these games. Whenever they're just blowouts, it kind of wastes the credibility of everybody. But when there was 14 playoffs, there was a bunch of blowouts as well.
12 out of 20.
There were a lot of blowouts.
I think there's a chance. What if there's a chance though that there is just a class of good and then great, a class of good and then a bunch of, you know what I mean? What if? But because you never know who's going to show up, and I would like to ask about an added factor this year that there hasn't been in the past. I think the cold won. I think Tennessee having to come up into Columbus with how cold that game was. It was so cold. I don't know what it was in the booth. Obviously, you were there.
Oh, it was cold. It was cold.
That was like a bitter cold.
If you're from Ohio, that was like a cold night.
Bitter.
Unseasonably cold. Bitter cold.
Bitter cold. So shout out to the Tennessee fans that traveled in there, and you talked about it, as did we on ours. It was that was a lot of Tennessee fans that traveled in. A lot. That was the most we've ever seen. They took over the College Game Day set. I almost picked them in the game because I was so bad about the Ohio State fans, just letting the Tennessee fans come into the cold and just take over College Game Day. But in the end, I thought the cold was going to be an equalizer for a lot of teams. I thought it was going to change the math. You got SUVs on these Big Ten teams. You don't have as many in the SEC teams because you don't need them as much because you're playing a lot of games. 50 degrees would be a cold game. 65, 70, you can build your team, construct your team a bit different. The players can be different than it is in the colder climates. How do you feel about the cold being an equalizer? And do you think it's going to be something that's going to continue to happen that way as we move forward with the college football playoff?
I think it's great. I mean, all these years, we've talked always about the Big Ten or Notre Dame or teams in the North going down into the South, into the humidity. A lot of times it's, a place in Florida, whether it's Miami or Orlando or, down in Texas or wherever it might be. And a lot of times it's we see it in the NFL all the time, with the Dolphins trying to come up to the North or the teams in the North trying to go down to Miami. That humidity is for real. And there's no doubt that the weather was a factor. But I don't know if the weather was a factor or a huge advantage. Maybe Penn State, SMU. I mean, it's not that warm in Knoxville. I mean, I don't know what the highs were all week, but guessing it was 30s and 40s. But it was cold for everybody. You guys in your fur coat. You had your big fur coat on down there.
Faux fur. Nothing done.
Yeah, I think it was cold for everybody. Could you feel your toes?
Toes were okay because I got some nice toe warmers from AJ Hawk.
Oh.
That was very kind of AJ to do that.
Thank you, AJ.
But we were talking earlier about, it sucks that it's cold for everybody. But if you have to deal with that on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and I'm not just talking about football-wise, I'm talking about go to get something to eat, go to the gas station, having to deal with it. I think that takes away the initial, this sucks. And I understand Knoxville, 30 degrees, obviously cold, freezing. Actually in America and whatever they call it in Canada. But, there's a difference between that and, 11, 9. It just there's a difference between that and, negative 10. So embracing this suck, I think you're forced to do whenever you live in it. And I think that does affect football.
Fair. I mean,
I think that affects football.
That's fair. Ty, I wonder if since this is something that I think can get tweaked along the way. I know Reese has been talking all year about those top 4 seeds, the conference champs, get to the end, and instead of looking at the conference champs, the only thing you get is you get a ticket into the playoff if you win a conference championship. But that doesn't necessarily mean you should be a top 4 team moving into the future. I think a lot of people are bringing that point up. I think that's a fair point to discuss and debate in the offseason. Or as you're saying, I mean, do you reseed? Is that fair to get to that next round of quarterfinals and reseed this thing and kind of start over? Would that create better matchups? I'm not sure. Because I think Arizona State, by brand, you look at that game against Texas and you think, oh, okay, Texas is going to kill those guys. But just watching Arizona State, especially since that week that their coach, Coach Dillingham, got sideways with the officials and went crazy, and everybody started to kind of pay attention to them. I think from that point on, seems like, man, they've been getting better and better every week, and they're more than just their talent and running back Scatterboo. I think the quarterback makes plays. So I don't know if that's necessarily a blowout. According to Las Vegas, it might be. In Boise, you just never know what to get from the blue turf. They're always the little engine that could every single year. They kind of relish this opportunity to play a big brand. In the past, going way back, this is the kind of game they would win. A game where people are just kind of looking past them. So I'm not poo-pooing these matchups, and I really apologize if I came across that way in that post-game rant. My big thing was, guys, if we're gonna put these teams in, and the logic is, hey, based on the resume, and these are the best teams that we thought, and they get beat by 20, I don't really care, because that's the committee's reasoning is that's the best. I should not have made that a Indiana thing or SMU thing or anybody else. It's more about the logic behind how we're getting to these teams. That's really, I guess, my only point I was making. So anything beyond that was just me being emotional and acting like an idiot.
Well, I respect and appreciate you saying that, but that has been something you've been saying, I think, for years now, right? I mean, you got into it last year with Florida State because this is similar angle. Hey, are we talking about best teams right now? Because you're on your third quarterback, and that is, I think that's because, and I don't want to speak for you, but it goes back to what you prefaced your question with at the college football conference or convention up there. That was just speaker after speaker after speaker, not knowing people are listening to them. Can we add some sauce into this just a little bit,
You're running point on that next August.
I don't think so. That sounds like a suit celebration there. So we can let them go ahead and continue to do that. But your question was, I call these games. I'm very lucky to call these games. You and Fallon both. So, like, when you guys are in there, you want great – everybody, for the good of college ball, we want great games to happen. So I think that is why you potentially got emotional. And I think a lot of people misread you. Like, you are, obsessed with college ball, love college ball.
I am. I have a problem.
Yes, I think so.
If you want to find me guilty of anything, I don't have an agenda for a conference or a team. I do have an agenda for the sport. I love college football like a child. I love college football.